I'm Allie and I need a new computer. My Razer Quartz just isn't really cutting it anymore. I can't work on the PS5. I can't game on the Mac, and this is way too big. So
we wanted to build a no compromises small form factor PC. Can it be done in 2024? I think it can.
Oh, it can.
So with a small form factor PC, you have to get acquainted with the case first. But with a typical ATX build, you might be able to start with your components. You don't have to worry about the size of the components as much. The bigger the case, the less you have to fuss with the details and specifications of how everything's gonna fit together. You can generally just kind of wing it and it works. But a lot more care and attention needs to go in when you're looking at a small form factor case. You have to know what graphics card's gonna fit. You have to know what motherboard's gonna fit, what CPU cooler is gonna fit. Yeah. All of those things are important. And the second thing that we decided when we were getting into this is what to base it on. And we wanted to build a future-proof computer. So we wanted to do something that was AM5. And then that determined that we'd have to get an ITX motherboard. So we'll get into that in just a second, but let me show you some of the details of the case.
The reason that I really loved the case is I love its sleek, minimalist design. It's got a softness to it from the textile right here. And I just really fell in love with this case by Fractal. It's the Ridge. We looked at a few of Fractal's other designs, like the North, which was too big, the Terra. The Terra is more of a statement piece, and I really needed something that was gonna fade into the home furnishings and not be as conspicuous. So I really love this case. And once we knew we were gonna build a computer, we have to get it.
So this case can come basically virtually apart, and we'll have to do that to build it. And what's really neat about it is completely interchangeable. Either side panel can go on either side. You can switch them and swap them depending on the airflow pattern that you want.
Top and bottom.
The top and bottom can swap, and they look virtually identical, but if you notice, there's feet holes to screw on at the bottom. So if you're gonna have it in the vertical orientation, you might want those there. You can orient the case this way where the graphics card is on top, and that's the standard, or inverted where the graphics card is on the bottom. Some people feel like having the graphics card on the bottom allows more convection current for the CPU. A lot of people have said that it's very typical with the Fractal case to be able to get enough airflow for the GPU, but it's a lot harder to get a lot of airflow for the CPU. So we're gonna look at different orientations and maybe even a few mods that we might talk about later that you could do to improve the airflow for the CPU.
We particularly are gonna look at the airflow because I'm interested in having it horizontal.
The Fractal Ridge is a great case to grow with. We should be able to do some of the latest technology of today, and we should be able to grow with it. It's got toolless slots right here for SATA SSDs. And then on the front panel here, you can sneak in 2 additional SSDs. And then depending on your motherboard, you can have several SSDs of the NVMe variety right on the motherboard. And those are the smaller ones that kind of look like RAM chips. So this is the case mostly disassembled. There are screws here, here, and here, so like these can come apart. You can take off this plate in here to get the graphics card in, and it gives you a lot of room to kind of put everything together.
It came with the 2 input fans to allow for more flow of air through the vent.
Yeah, the default position for these 2 fans, I should point out, has the airflow being drawn in and blowing against the graphics card over here. So in the orientation that most graphics cards would be in, this would be the back plane of the graphic card, and the air would be coming this way in, blowing into the fans of the graphics cards.
Yeah, and then hopefully out.
Let's get this away and let's talk about the motherboard for just a second. This is a Gigabyte B650i Aorus Ultra. So I've built with the 650 chipset before, the more advanced one. We previously opened it to inspect everything and make sure that we can go through the process correctly here. So this is a small ITX motherboard. You can put 2 SSDs in this area in here, 2 NVMe SSDs. You can put another SSD back down here. Don't mind our bolt dongle. It's got Ethernet, Wi-Fi, 3.2 USB, 3.1 USB, and then 2 regular USBs.
Justin, why does this say BIOS USB?
Oh, that's a good question. So this motherboard has a special feature on it that allows you to flash the BIOS before you get started. So all you need to do is power it up with your power supply, and then you can flash the BIOS without a CPU or RAM in it. And that's important because the AM5 and AM4 platforms stick around for a while. So you might want to switch out your RAM, you might want to switch out your processor, and processors and RAM might come out in the future that the platform wasn't originally set up for. So when it comes out in the future, you'll need a BIOS upgrade to do it. So either if you get a motherboard secondhand, or if you're getting a motherboard that has been sitting in the warehouse for a while, you can get the motherboard and you don't need an old CPU or old set of RAM to be able to get it up and started.
Right?
So this allows you as like a home hobbyist or a home enthusiast who's building your own PC to take a USB stick, get it configured, and then plug it into the BIOS port up here, plug in your power supply and install the BIOS. Now I've already set up this stick according to the directions. Yeah, why don't we take a look at the power supply? I got some custom cables so that it can fit in with the rest of the aesthetic, the white aesthetic.
This is the Republic of Gamers low-key white edition power supply. And honestly, the most beautiful power supply I've ever seen. It's gorgeous. And I've never felt that way about a power supply.
So this is just so exciting. This is one of the reasons to build a small form factor PC. In the past, you weren't able to get 850 watts in such a small form factor. But now you can get 850. I think this series also has 1,000. So
wow.
you can really build
That's great.
a beefy CPU and a beefy graphics card right in the case. Let me just show you a little bit of what this looks like. This has a clear fan in it. It's RGB. It's all brushed milled aluminum on the front, a mirrored finish right here that I'm getting fingerprints on. And when we get this in the case, it's just gonna look absolutely amazing. I figured out which cables we need to get this set up. This is the ATX power cable here. We'll plug this side into the wall when we flash the BIOS here. Plug this side on the motherboard, and the smaller one and if you can see, it's showing you that the motherboard are right here. So we've got to get those two in place. Now there's one more cable. These cables are great because they label which side goes into the power supply
So much easier.
and which side goes into the motherboard. So this is the other one that we put in, and it goes down here into this slot. So now we're gonna wire it up, and there's a CPU pin right here. And that's all that we would need to wire up to load the BIOS.
Which is so much more simple than I thought.
Yeah, we'll transition over here where the monitor is. But another great feature of the AM5 platform is that some of the CPUs have a small graphics card built into them. So when you're test benching and getting everything kind of set up, you don't even need the graphics card installed.
That's great.
And that brings us to another point about small form factor. Before you build the machine in the case, you want to build the machine outside of the case to make sure that everything is working and you don't have to deal with any RMAs or take everything apart to get it all back together.
Yeah.
So you want to start with building it outside of the case, either on a test bench similar to kind of like this. This is wood, it's anti-static, or on another desk that's
Or
anti-static.
a silicone mat.
A silicone mat, like the ones you can get from Gamers Nexus. I will point out while we're talking about the power supply, although I really love these cables, we all know that the new high voltage cables for the graphics card have the little sensing pins on them. And I added some electrical tape around right next to the base of this plug to make sure that these cables weren't wiggling around too much. I was really kind of worried about these sensing cables moving right here at this joint. It kind of looked like
They're so delicate.
yeah, it looked like they might be a little too delicate, and I figured I'd give them a little extra strength. So we'll put that aside. We don't need this cable until we install the GPU. Okay, so we're gonna move this over here. We've got a little computer station set up. So we did not get the latest BIOS shipped with our machine. The current version is F10. We're currently, as you can see, at F8. And the hardware revision number for this motherboard is 1.0. And so we need to update the BIOS. So we'll be doing that next. So you need to flash the BIOS on your B650i motherboard from Gigabyte. They have this great little feature called QFlash Plus. It allows you to flash your BIOS without a CPU in the socket or RAM in the DIMM slots. All you have to do is plug in your ATX cabling, plug in your CPU ATX plug, make sure that your power switch is in the off position, plug in your NEMA cable, take your USB key and plug it into the BIOS slot. And you'll also notice that there's this Q Flash Plus button on the side. That's what you have to press to get this party started. We'll turn on the power supply, press the button, it's flashing the BIOS, and this should take about 3 to 4 minutes. Something that makes this easier is when you're using a much older USB key. It's probably the only time that you want to use an old USB key. Something that's smaller than 32 gigabytes is what's best when you're trying to format it, because it can only read FAT32, and FAT32 is a 32-bit file system that can only support up to 32 gigabytes of space. As you can see, there's a flashing dot in here while the BIOS is flashing. That light down there should also stop when this is done. It probably had a brief pause there for a second as it's now verifying the flash BIOS that it did. Or maybe it's flashing the BIOS twice. This motherboard does have support for dual BIOS. This is a really cool feature if you're getting a new CPU and the BIOS doesn't necessarily support it yet, or you're getting new memory and the BIOS doesn't necessarily support the new faster memory. It can really help you out so that you don't have to have an older CPU to just get it started. Oh, another thing to point out is I didn't have to wire up the case to do any of this. This motherboard has a power supply and reset switch jumpers right here, but I didn't have to use either of those to get this process started. All I needed was the PSU and the motherboard. I heard a small little click from the power supply when it completed. I think it rebooted and there's no more light. So I now think that it's completed with the flash. Switch off the power supply, unplug the motherboard, unplug these power cables, and we can get on to building the rest of the computer and then come back and try and do our first boot. So now we've updated our BIOS and now we can build the system, but first we have to build it outside the case so that we can make sure all the parts work, everything boots, we'll install the operating system, get it all ready, and then we'll put it in the case. So, first things first, we can put the CPU in. Now, we've got the 7800 X3D here. We lift up this little piece here. There's this little plastic piece in here, which is a cover to protect the delicate pins on the motherboard. You don't want to break those because it can ruin the whole motherboard.
Because you're matching pins to pins.
So you lift that up and you look for the corner. There's a little corner right there, a little triangle. There's a little triangle right here on the X3D. All of the Ryzen chips are the same. And you gently set it in there, as gently as you possibly can. Again, you don't want to bend the pins. Then you close down the lid, apply a little bit of pressure, and then the plastic should pop off as you push the lever down. So now that that's done, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pair a pair of memory with this. And we're going to put the memory in next. This is DDR5 6000 memory. 6000 speed memory is about the sweet spot for the AM5 and 7000 series chips. So they pair well nicely together.
On the motherboard, it actually shows you that you want DDR5 too.
Something special about this memory for especially small form factor machines is that the Ripjaw series here is only 33 millimeters tall. It is one of the highest compatibilities you can get for small form factors and for the CPU fans that you're going to put in here. So we've got that in there. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take off this SSD cover. And something else I should know is that there's a little bit of a connector here that you won't need to take off to put the SSD in.
Yeah.
But we took it off so that it's easier to get in there. We actually broke the connector just a little bit during that process because it's so difficult. So I wouldn't advise taking it off.
No, keep it on if you're not filming a video.
So these small form factor ITX motherboards are so tight that they have to find ways to put stuff in here. So everything's built in here in layers. And in here is your HD audio pin connector. So we probably won't put this back on until later, but we can put the SSD in there. Now inside here underneath, there's another SSD slot. This one is the PCI 5.0 and underneath is the PCI 4.0
4.0,
slot.
yeah.
So I'll just take this off to show you quickly. Now there we go.
Oh.
So it comes off and you can see it adheres to the motherboard in 2 spots. I bet you each one of these is one of the NVMe ports. This is the 4.0 on the bottom. And if you notice, this one on the bottom is not a toolless M2 slot, while this one on the top is a toolless M2 slot. So we don't need to get access to the bottom. We're only gonna put one SSD in here now. There is room for 3 SSDs on here. Again, one here, one underneath this board, and then another one on the bottom right here.
Which is great for later. Another way that we're future-proofing this build.
So this is a Samsung 990 Pro. It's a PCI 4. So what's neat about this SSD slot in here is it's actually got thermal tape on the bottom. There's no chips on the bottom for that to really be affected by, but it's nice that there's thermal tape on the bottom. So we'll put that in here. So we got a number of different heat sinks. We're gonna install right now the Noctua NHL2 Ghost. This is a special edition for small form factor that has a little
smaller.
bit more flexibility for RAM. As you can see, it has a 92mm Noctua fan on the bottom. And this here. So it's a little bit shallower, I think, than some of the other heat sinks in this exact range. But what really differentiates this one is that there's a little extra clearance for your memory. So to install this cooler, the first thing that we need to do, there's the default heatsink fittings that are on here. And you can just take these off on the AM4 platform. There's 8 screws on the bottom that hold the backplate on, and we're just gonna take off the 4 outside ones and put in the Noctua mounts. Okay, so we've selected our orientation. Again, we're gonna loosely thread these in. So now the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put some thermal paste on this. We're gonna use MX4 today. I've used Arctic Silver MX4 for a while now. It's one of the best. There might be a couple that are a little bit better, but they're all within about 0.5 degrees Celsius of each other. Now, I'm not gonna fuss too much about spreading this out because we're just putting the heatsink on really quick to get the operating system on here. And then once we install it in the case, we have to take this off real quick too. So we'll see how good the spread is on the thermal paste. Now, inside the heatsink, there is this nice and dandy little tool that is just long enough for you to get all the way through.
It's perfect.
And fasten it in there.
Looks pretty snug
That
to
feels
me.
snug to me. Okay, so I'm gonna do one more visual check just to make sure. I think we're good there. I think we're good and snug. We're gonna take the fan.
And you're gonna wanna keep any extra parts in case you wanna change the orientation of the cooler.
Okay, so just a little gut check. We've got the RAM in, we've got the SSD in, we've got the CPU in. I think we're ready to plug this in. You might have noticed that we haven't yet installed our 4070 graphics card. We chose this graphics card because of its form factor. It has enough power, it's affordably priced. Again, we didn't want to overcommit on this generation. This 7800X3D processor has actually a video card built into it. So we're gonna make use of the DisplayPort on the actual motherboard to drive the video, to do the installation of the process of the operating system and get this all set up. Okay, so here we are at where Allie's desk is gonna be. We're gonna steal or borrow the power switch from the case. And what's nice about this motherboard is it's kind of set up to be on a hot bench like this. Yeah, so this first one is the power switch right here. Plug that in. take the CPU one, plug it in there. So we've got both connected. This fancy new DisplayPort cable here. We're gonna take our Bolt USB dongle and plug it down here. Now we've already configured the Bolt dongle so that it can work in the BIOS. We'll have the mouse here. And we got like probably the cheapest keyboard because it's wired, and we're gonna use this machine mostly wireless going in the future. And we're gonna do this just so that we can enter the BIOS and configure things later on. So that is our little insurance policy. So we've also already pre-configured this Pebble 2 keyboard. Now the Pebble 2 is just like the K380 series, but better. It's more like a K380S. And what this does is it connects to the Bolt connection as opposed to the K380, which connects to the wireless standard that Logitech has. So now we're ready to turn on the power supply. We're gonna turn on the power supply, and we're gonna turn on the computer. The power button on the case worked. We're giving it just a minute here. I can feel the fan moving here, and let's try to get into the operating system. So I'm gonna try first try to get into the BIOS. So I'm gonna try and use, I think F1 or delete will work.
Oh, and there it is.
The BIOS has been reset. Please reconfigure your BIOS. We gotta turn on the mouse. Mouse is on, mouse is working. That keyboard is working. So again, we're using Bolt, Logitech's Bolt standard, and we're able to navigate in the BIOS. Let's just check to make sure everything's good. We've got the latest BIOS, F20A at the time of filming. That's what the latest BIOS is. It's got the latest AGESA drivers in the BIOS. I think that's the right term. This is what the BIOS uses to communicate with the CPU and set timings for the RAM. We're not going to do XMP right now or Expo. This RAM supports XMP only. I don't believe it supports Expo. But what's nice about this motherboard is that it does support XMP, even though that's an Intel standard, or Expo. So that really makes it so you can get cheaper memory, or you have more flexibility in the memory that you get. Okay, so everything's looking pretty good. It's recognizing our SSD. Our system temps are reasonable, so we don't have to worry about that. The RAM is clocking in at 4,800 megatransfers per second. It's rated for 6,000, but that's okay. We don't need the fastest RAM to install the operating system, and we'll monkey with other stuff later on. Everything's looking good. Okay, we've already pre-downloaded and installed on here the Windows operating system. We're installing the operating system without a GPU. I mean, there is a GPU, it's on the CPU. It's actually pretty nice. Imagine how much more cumbersome this would be if the GPU were here right now while we're trying to do that.
Oh yeah, it would be a big difference.
So this really makes it easier to kind of get your system set up and validated before you put it in the case. Okay, here we are, we're back. The operating system has installed, the mouse is working, the wireless keyboard is working. Again, I didn't have to install any drivers because these two devices were already paired with the Bolt. So the Bolt, again, is an improvement over the unifying technology because it's a little bit faster, a little bit more responsive, a little bit better for gamers. I mean, these are not gaming class devices, but they should be much better than unifying. So there we go, it posted, that's great. Now let's log in. So now we are ready to shut this down, install it in the case, install the graphics card, and we should have a built machine. Okay, so here we go. We've got the case. We know that this system will work. We still haven't tested the video card, but that's okay. We can do that in the case. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna take apart this case a little bit so that it's easier to work on. Again, small form factor computers are a little bit more difficult to work on.
I think we need those fans out of there, right?
Yeah, so we're gonna take these fans out of here. I don't think that we will need them. I'm not sure yet, but we might as well take them out and see where we are.
We wanna see what it's like without the fans And then if we do need additional airflow, then we will put fans in.
Again, this computer or this case hasn't had too much trouble with cooling the GPU. So let's see what our baseline is without the fans, and we can always add them. We did a pre-fit test on this GPU and the fans, and these are 25mm thickness fans, and they do fit up against this Gigabyte 3 fan.
Yeah,
I think these are each 90mm.
They are, yeah. It does fit.
This is the Aero card. This is a 4070. It does fit up against it, but it is touching. So I don't know if it's going to cause vibrations or buffeting or something like that.
We were a little concerned.
So let's just start without that and see where we're at, and we can add fans.
2 hours later.
So here we go. This is the build. It's too bad actually that you can't see the graphics card on the same side.
So beautiful.
As the other. It's kind of like opposite.
It's such a pretty graphics card too. Should we button her up?
Yeah, let's button her up. So there we go. We've got that case complete.
It's a computer!
Now let's try to, let's plug it in and boot her up. All right, so we've booted the operating system with the memory. Let's again double check memory is at the correct speed. It's got the correct timings. So it's got our graphic card in it. Great. Excellent.
I have a computer!
This has 2 graphics cards in it, one in the CPU and the Nvidia one. So it's important to note that this has a Samsung 990 Pro in it, and there have been some firmware issues with the Samsung 990 Pro. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your firmware is up to date. If it's not up to date for the 990 Pro, you can get some additional unnecessary write cycles and wear out the drive. But this drive shipped with the correct firmware. I just got this USB key on Amazon. I had found that a number of my old USB keys I had optimized for price and size, but this one I got the fastest USB that I could get in that sort of size category. I think it was only $40, and it makes a big difference to have a faster USB, especially when you're like moving files around and installing stuff. I might even try, I wonder if this drive is fast enough to, or if it will impact performance to actually run some Steam games or apps off of it. So that might be another test to try to go down. All right, I'm gonna finish installing Steam and log in, and then we'll be right back.